Hello and welcome to our broadcast. I'm your host, Meredith Cunningham, Media and Community Relations Manager at Covenant Health. As a reminder, the information provided during this event is for information purposes only. For any medical questions, please reach out to your primary care or healthcare professional. Let's begin. Joining me today during this live event will be Stacy Fry, Senior Child Life Specialist at Covenant Children's, Holly Legere, Child Life Specialist at Providence Anchorage, and Leah Thompson, Child Life Specialist at Providence Sacred Heart Medical Center. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's jump right in and let's talk about first what you guys do in your roles with Covenant Children's and Providence. So Stacy, let's start with you. What do you do for Covenant Children's?
I am one of the senior child life specialist right now in our department, which we have 6 child life specialists currently. Hoping to add another one. We also have music therapists that falls under our department, and we work in all the areas where you would find children within the hospital. So the emergency department, day surgery, radiology, our general floor, our pediatric ICU. We're about to have somebody in our NICU as well. And then we do have a women's hospital within ours. So we do get consulted sometimes on the mom-baby unit, more for like sibling and other type of issues. Those are the typical areas that we work in our hospital.
Wow, you guys are all over. So Holly, how does that compare to what you guys get to do in Alaska?
We're pretty similar. So specifically, I work in the emergency department, but we do pretty much the same model. We cover everywhere that we see pediatric patients. So same emergency department, NICU, pediatrics in the pediatric intensive care unit. And then we do get consulted every once in a while to adult floors for patients, children, if they need us.
Okay. And what about you? Sweet Leah, what do you guys do over at your hospital?
Yeah, so just like Stacy and Holly, we're pretty similar. We are a staff of 13. And so we have expanded a little bit more. I currently work in the hematology oncology outpatient clinic, and we have kind of all the same areas. We have surgery center, inpatient, general peds, PICU, inpatient hematology, oncology. We have 2 full-time staff down in the emergency department, and then one of our specialists gets to work with all of our palliative care families and is consulted to the NICU and to children of adult patients as well.
Well, it sounds like you guys are going to bring some unique perspectives to the conversation today, so I'm excited. But I think what we really need to talk about first is what is a certified child life specialist? Leah, do you want to kick us off for that?
Sure, yeah. So I think certified child life specialist, we are here in the hospital to help children cope with all of the stressors that the hospitalization can bring. So whether it's procedural support, education, some form of diversion during a procedure, we are there to advocate on behalf of the patient as well as their family. And we're just an overall supporter of children and families. And, as Holly mentioned earlier, siblings are a big thing that we do as well, and making sure that the whole family unit is included and it's not just the patient.
Holly, do you have anything to add?
I think she covered it pretty well. It does vary a little bit about where you are in the department specifically, but it covers our role in general.
And I really like the approach that you guys are talking about in taking care of the entire family as a whole, because just because there's one patient doesn't mean the whole family is impacted. So thank you for adding on that. So Stacy, let me ask you, our next question is, why is it important for hospitals to have certified child life specialist caregivers?
I think it's important because we bring a different perspective than just the medical staff does. So obviously the doctors and nurses are trying to figure out what's going on, fix them, give them meds, surgery, whatever is needed. And a lot of times don't have the luxury of being able to spend that little bit of extra time sort of getting to know the families and sort of helping the patient and that family cope. So one of our bonuses, I guess, is that we, based on our assessments, have that time. Like if we need to spend most of our day with one family because that's what they need, we have that luxury to be able to sort of get to know them. Like it was mentioned, help explain what's happening, educate the child or the sibling if need be, just support the parents, kind of find out some extra information that a lot of time we can go back to the medical staff and let them know if there's something that we learned that might be beneficial for them, or something that they mentioned that maybe needs to be clarified from the medical staff perspective and things like that. So lots of times the luxury of time, plus with our education and background, all of it's on a developmental level. So we have that time too to sort of break it down as the liaison to figure out the best way to make sure that the child and the family understand what it is that the medical staff is saying on a level that they can understand and cope with.
I think we can all sometimes use an interpreter in medical situations. And so thank you guys for doing that for us and our families. So I want to talk about what kind of education or degree is needed. So Holly, can you talk to us about that and what you guys had to learn about and go through for your education and certifications?
Yeah, sure. So certified child life specialists are bachelor's educated, but many locations are starting to lean toward master's preferred for the certification. We have to go through education that includes child development. We do a lot of bereavement and grief courses, play theory, and really understanding the whole family. So we keep talking about that family system, right? So we do a lot of family-centered care. So once you complete and have this kind of course of 10 courses are needed, you go on to take a certification exam to become certified. So it also requires an internship experience prior to certification as well. And that is, I believe, 600 hours at this point.
Wow, that's quite a bit of time. Is there some continued education that goes along with that as well?
Yeah, so every 5 years you have to recertify, and you have to have a certain amount of continuing education hours to be eligible to do that.
So let's talk about the typical things that a certified child life specialist might do for pediatric patients and their families in the children's hospital setting, but specifically maybe how that varies from region to region. Holly was saying she was a little more remote than some other places than probably what Leah deals with. So Leah, let's start with you and we'll kind of do around the table.
Yeah, so I think it totally varies based off what unit you're in. And also our populations, I think, are just so different just based off of where we're located. But yeah, I think our typical services here at Providence Sacred Heart, we do a lot of clinical focus. So a lot of education, preparation, a lot of coping teaching, checking for understanding. We have a couple therapists or child life specialists who are more play focused here. So their units, you'll see a lot more play, a lot more playroom time. So I think depending on where you're at within the hospital, you'll get kind of both the clinical and play side of our role.
What about you, Holly?
I think the way that Alaska does vary a little bit is we see families who have to be flown in for medical care. So we do a lot of the same ideas of education, coping, preparation as everywhere else, but we have that added aspect of helping the family adjust to being in a really big city if they're not originally from the big city, and kind of navigating that in addition to just navigating the hospital environment.
And Stacy, what do we see the most of here in Texas, New Mexico region?
I mean, we kind of have a wide variety. We do service such a large area, eastern New Mexico and Texas, and being the only licensed children's hospital in our part of the state and region, we do get a lot of kids in. There are a few things that we don't have here that we do have to send our kids out to other larger cities in Texas, like Dallas or Houston. But for the most part, we can take care of any major needs. Occasionally some like larger traumas would have to go, or if any of our oncology children need like transplants and things, we don't do them here, so we have to send them to other places. So along with a lot of what they mentioned that we do, it does obviously vary by unit, and some of it is preparing them for what they're going to experience when they have to leave. So we do a lot of collaborating and talking with other child life specialists that we know of the hospitals they're going to be headed to, so that we can best prepare them of what to expect when they get there to wherever they're going. A name to put with it, which also helps too when we get kids in from other places. It's always nice to be able to be like, oh, I talked with fill in the blank for the name of the child life specialist of where you came from, and they told me a little bit of this. And so that also helps too with a little bit of comfort level, especially if the family is familiar with the role of a child life specialist, depending on what they've been in the hospital for. So they know that we're kind of that, okay, I know what they do person, and could be a little bit more relatable, especially if they're having to go somewhere that's very different from what they're used to.
Now, I'm sure there's no typical day in the life of a certified child life specialist, especially for someone like Holly who's in the ER. But let's try to talk about what a typical day in the life of you guys is like. So, Holly, let's start with you.
Sure. So in the emergency room, I am there and attempt to meet all our pediatric patients that come through. We do have a 9-bed pediatric emergency area specifically. So in a typical day, I'll prep a couple of kids for an IV placement, might have a couple of suture repairs that we have to do, broken bones. I will respond to our traumas as well. And in those cases, I spend a lot of time, depending on how the patient is doing and if their family is present, helping the family, helping the patient navigate that really chaotic experience in the emergency department. And then after I've, helped calm that family down from the initial entrance to the ER and totally that disruption in their day, work to help them transition through the rest of the hospital experience. So if they're then going to radiology or if they have to go to surgery or they're being admitted, I'll help them get comfortable in the next area that they're transitioning to.
You've got to stay on your toes. That sounds like. Well, Stacey, what is a day like? Walk us through a day for you at Covenant Children's.
I work in our pediatric ICU area is where I'm working here. So mine, like we say, always kind of varies. Kind of come in, get my census, sort of see what patients we still have that I know from like the previous day, what patients we may have that are new, the reasons why they're there. I kind of go around, chat with all the nurses and the charge nurse about things that I might have discovered in the chart or know that may have been upcoming or are planning to happen that day or have happened, just sort of get a rundown. And then I really try to go and meet all of our families at least once in the day and touch base with them, even if it's just a family that may have been here for weeks. And it's just a touch point of like, how are we doing today? Or coming off a weekend, how did that go? And ours can vary from a lot of things. Seems like now we have a lot of neuro types things. So we'll have neuro, we'll have oncology. So sometimes we have kids coming in for the procedures for the day. So what kids are coming to our unit for their various procedures or some different outpatient procedures. Most of ours are all done in the ICU if they have to be sedated, but are not a surgery. So I typically try to see all of those families first. And then it's a lot of probably more emotional and support for the families in the ICU on a day-to-day basis than it is for the actual patients. Occasionally we will get, those who are old enough and I do need to prepare them for something, or we do need to talk about something that may have happened from like an accident or injury or something like that, that maybe they don't remember, or some of the medical side effects and things like that from wherever they're here. So it really kind of varies, but it's a lot of building that relationship and sort of slowly building that trust if possible in the ICU. It's not necessarily as quick of a relationship builder as probably the ER is, of having to like, I got to build that trust quick because I'm about to tell you everything that they're fixing to do. So we have a little bit more lead time in that. So I kind of have that luxury of being able to sort of build those relationships with the families and patients.
And it may be that Leah has a very similar situation with the oncology hematology clinic, because people are coming back week after week, month after month. And so you see them quite often. So tell us what a day is like for you, Leah.
Yeah, so being that we're in the clinic, we have patients who are coming and going all day long. So a lot of them come in just for like a lab and exam. So we check how their counts are doing, they see the doctor and they go home. Or they might be coming to us for an outpatient chemotherapy. So we kind of have a wide range. We see about, on average, 25 to 35 plus kids a day who are coming in. So we stay pretty busy. I'm typically doing procedural support and diversion throughout the day. And then I get to, we do build rapport with these families because we see them so often. So it's similar to Stacy. It's a lot of checking in, how are things going since the last time we talked? A lot of checking for understanding for our newer diagnosed patients. Have you had these conversations with brother or sister at home? Or how is patient responding to the news of whatever the recent scans are? Just kind of seeing and assessing where everyone in the family is at, so we kind of know which direction to take as we move forward and implement different interventions with the patients and families. And yeah, I think my day is as typical. That's about as typical as it gets. But every day is different, and we're growing all the time. So just finding spaces and new diagnoses come in all the time, and so just kind of assessing what we can do to make the transition easier for them. And it is a pretty long journey for a lot of these families. So what we're doing, our focus in the beginning and towards the end, it looks so vastly different because we've hopefully instilled lots of coping along the way, and they're not as reliable on us as they progress through treatment.
But you guys are still definitely there if they need you. So you're along for the ride the whole way. So we're going to pause from our questions real quick and actually answer a question from one of our viewers who wants to know that this seems like it must be really emotional work. How do you take care of yourselves after you've taken care of kids and families all day long? Leah, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think the first thing that they talk about in education for child life is self-care. I think it's honed in on us, and it is ingrained in our brains so much of finding how to unwind after a long, stressful day, or finding where you can just kind of center yourself. I remember in schooling, someone, was like, give yourself a little mantra before you walk into these rooms or before you go into a tough conversation or situation, and just, be in the right mindset so that when you walk in, you're being as present for the patients and families as you can be, and not making it about you, but really figuring out how you can focus on them. And then when you get home is when you can focus on you. So for me personally, living in the inland Northwest, it is beautiful, and getting outside and being outdoors as much as I can, relying on my coworkers, debriefing when needed or when possible, and just finding your people is kind of what I found to be the greatest success in my child life career so far.
So Stacy, how do you kind of practice self-care so then you can come back to work every day and take care of our families?
Mine's similar. Yes, you hear that all the time. I feel like I preach this to my students all the time as well, that are getting into it, because it can be hard to separate. I feel like I do a lot better job now than I did 16 years ago, when I started, of being able to sort of, it doesn't sound right to turn it on and turn it off, but kind of Leah was mentioning, sort of when to be there, and you're focusing and doing our job to help the families, and then switching out of it when you're done. But just enjoying time at home, spending time with my husband and son, going and actually doing fun things when we can, enjoying basically anything else you can. I'd love to be able to be outside, but ours is usually windy and dirty, and by the time I get off work. But enjoying, that, and just having that mental downtime, or doing some craft kind of things, working on stuff with other friends and family. And so and then being, it makes you feel grateful for your family and people's health and things when you kind of see different things on a daily basis in the hospital. So that's helpful.
Probably provides a little perspective, for all of us who are happy and healthy right now. Now, what about you, Holly? Is there a mantra that Leah mentioned she says to herself? Is there anything you say to yourself to hype you up for the day and then help you come back home at the end of it?
I do. At the end of the day, I kind of have a little reflection that I go through. So I kind of like check in with myself, check in with my coworkers. We're all there together experiencing these really difficult things. So I like to check in and see how they're doing and try to focus on some of the really positives of the day, and reflect on if there's anything that I need to, come back to the next day and debrief with somebody or not. Working in the ER, I am the only child life specialist there a lot of the time, so I don't have somebody to go to right away. So I do have to kind of come back in the next day when somebody's there if I need to process that. And then it very similar to the two of you. I live in Alaska and we have amazing mountains and outdoor opportunities, and that's a huge thing for me to be able to use my mornings and my evenings and weekends to just get out into the fresh air, and kind of come back to myself.
Well, we see some great photos behind you. If that's what Alaska looks like, we all may need to take a vacation up there. But thank you, ladies, for that answer. And we actually have another viewer question we want to get to. Do most hospitals that are not children's hospitals have these services, or are they specific to children's hospitals? And Stacey, I know you've worked in a couple of different places, so can you answer that one for us?
Yes. Typically, you'll mostly just find child life specialists at children's hospitals. There may be some over the country, none that come to mind specifically, that may have hired like one to work in their ER or something if they sort of see adult and pediatrics in their emergency department. But it's typically children's hospitals. So a lot of people also don't even know about our profession and role unless you yourself or you've had a child or family member need to be in the hospital and have had a touch point with a child life specialist. But there are, it is becoming bigger and sort of getting out into the community. So you will find them now in a lot of like hospice settings, a child life specialist that works with different hospice patients. Some I've heard that work in dental offices. I don't know any personally. And sort of other high stress environments where you would find children needing to go for different procedures or just emotional support for coping things. But probably 99% of the time, you're mostly going to find a child life specialist in a children's hospital. And a lot of them, one of the ones I worked at in Houston area had a lot of like satellite hospitals. So they build smaller little children's hospitals further out in the community. And I know a part of their write-ups, it was to include at least one child life specialist had to be on staff because it was being considered a children's hospital in the region. So it is becoming, thankfully, a little more like noticed for our role and the importance of our role, even if the hospital might be smaller and they may only be able to have one person, but one's better than not having any at all.
Well, it sounds like that's the benefit to having your child cared for at a children's specific hospital. So thank you for that. Providence specifically, our vision is to know me, care for me, and ease my way. How does that role of a child life specialist play into that vision? Leah?
Yeah, I think a major part of our role is just being an advocate. So really seeing the patient and knowing who they are, and like I mentioned earlier, building that rapport, and really, if we can know these families, we can assess what their needs might be so that we can care for them. And by us being a part of their care team and by us having that rapport and understanding what their needs might be, then we can ease their way. We can say, hey, I know this thing that we have coming up in a couple weeks is going to be really hard for you or the patient or the sibling or whatever it might be. So we can say, here are some great tips leading up to that. And then on the day of, here's what, like, let's put a coping plan in place and get it prepped now so that when, the big day comes, we already kind of know what to expect. So I think just like being an advocate and knowing these families is the main way that I think we embody the know me, care for me, and ease my way.
Leah, that's actually a great segue into our next viewer question, which is, how do y'all explain complex diseases and diagnoses with kids and their siblings? So if you want to go ahead and take that one away.
Sure. So I think that in the oncology world, it looks a little bit different than obviously the ER and the PICU setting to an extent. Our patients, it's pretty life-altering and life-threatening at times for them. And so it's so important that we educate the patient, but also the family, because the patient's going to be getting a lot of the attention and the focus from mom or dad or whoever might be their guardian. And so making sure that everyone understands, they might have a central line that's going to, be a new accessory on their body, and it might look a little different, and brother or sister might have to play more gently with the patient. So I think the main thing that I think in child life, we use a lot of bibliotherapy. So a lot of books, whether it's actual written text or if it's us creating a social story for the patient and family saying, this is what my hospital journey is going to look like, and here are the people I'm going to meet and interact with. Or it might be, hey, you have this new diagnosis of cancer, and giving a meaning to that word, and not in a negative tone, but just to say, this is what your new battle is going to be. And so kind of explaining that to them, again, in language that they understand and that they can, using, child development and age appropriate language. And so I think that's the resources we use. We also have, medical dolls that we can show them before they have procedures to say, hey, this is obviously what your body looks like now, but after you have your procedure or whatever it might be, this is what might be different for you. So I think using all the resources out there and making sure that, again, it's constantly assessing where they're at and what their needs might be. I think day in and day out, that's so much of our role is reassessing and checking for understanding.
And Stacey, I want you to expand on Leah's answer a little bit because of our next viewer question, which is, what are tips that you can share with parents who manage their children's chronic diseases to help them kids not be afraid of the hospital?
That's a good one. Our chronic kids, for sure, especially starting out, they're probably all kids are nervous. Sometimes you have the random, like, oh, I love this place, kiddo, but not much. But basically kind of touching what she's on, like helping prepare them as much as we can. If they've got their routine of, oh, I'm coming from, 2 hours away, so we're going to put our numbing cream on before we leave, so it's numb when we get there. I'm going to take these certain comfort items with me, or things I want to do to kind of help normalize or keep them distracted as well while they're here, depending on how long they may have to stay. Being honest with them as much as possible is a big one we always tell parents, and depending on their situation, a lot of the times it's hard for the parents to do that because they want to be protected, like they want to protect their kids from maybe what they know is coming down the road and things like that. But a lot of times telling parents to keep that trust, because this is going to be, especially in that case, like a longer journey. And kids are smart. So if you break their trust early, like it's going to be hard for us to get that back, or hard for us to help you guys get that back as they go down the line. So if they know, like, is this going to hurt? It might hurt a little bit. Yep. But we're going to have some things we can try to not make it hurt as much. Or is this medicine going to taste bad? It might. I don't know. A lot of times our trick's like, oh, you tell me. I'm not allowed to have that medicine. So you tell me what it tastes like so that I can tell other kids in the future of maybe what it might taste like. So all those kind of little things as they go along really sort of help with that journey. Or if it may not be more of a chronic thing, it may be more of a sudden accident or illness or something like that. Again, encouraging them to, like, some of those maybe be more difficult conversations, especially if it might be a patient that may have a really severe injury, or maybe they may not survive their accident or illness or whatever it is, that we can help those families guide them through that process too, of being honest and what words to use and not use, because again, they're just trying to protect them, but going to sleep or being asleep is very confusing for kiddos if they're not actually asleep and they may be, passing away or something like that, because that can make them scared to go to sleep. I go to sleep and so-and-so never came home and never woke up, so I don't want to go to sleep. So things that, like, wording like that, a lot of wording, I feel like, because a lot of it can be very confusing to children depending on their age and their developmental level. So we can help with families in that aspect. So if families need help with that, they can always reach out to their local Children's Hospital's Child Life Department, and we can help with that if we hadn't already been involved with that family.
That's a great perspective. I'm always astounded by how intuitive kids can be and how we really don't give them enough credit sometimes. And I just want to say thank you real quick to the audience because they're really listening to what you guys are talking about and asking appropriate follow-up questions. I don't even have to think about them. Our audience is doing that for us. So I have a great one right now for Miss Holly. What techniques can parents and guardians use at home to help kids suffering from trauma? Because not every circumstance will take them into the hospital where they might have access to one of y'all as a child life specialist. So what can parents do at home?
Sure. So this is something I do have conversations with parents about all of the time, because even when they come to us, they're going home and they're still facing that traumatic experience and they're processing through it. So a lot of what we've just been talking about, being really honest with your kids in a way that they understand, right? You don't want to use really big words that they're not going to be able to comprehend, but you know your kid best, and parents can really meet them where they're at and help explain what's happening and what's going to continue happening and what may not happen anymore. So really kind of trying to break things down a little bit so that kids understand what's going on with whatever traumatic experience they've had. And then I also really like to encourage parents to give kids a way to let that out. So we talked a little bit before about play, and a lot of child life specialists use play frequently in their practice to let kids have something that they're familiar with. So trauma is something that we don't want kids to be familiar with, right? And it's something that they don't know how to kind of manipulate, but toys and play, and that is something that kids know and love and can do. So that's giving them something that they have mastery over. And a lot of times it helps them process the experience that they're going through as well. For older kids, giving them the outlet that they have a lot of times, writing, drawing, expressive things. And then reaching out to therapy resources as well. You know, child life specialists, we're not therapists. We have these skills that we can help kids in the hospital cope with what they're going through, but reaching out to the therapists in your community is also really beneficial for patients when they have something that's really big that they need to work through further.
Great suggestions. Thanks. All of y'all are doing a great job. And we're getting close to the end of our time together. So I do want to ask this very important question to each of you before we go. But what do you find most satisfying about your role as a certified child life specialist? So Holly, let's start with you.
The most rewarding part of my job is seeing a kid who thinks that they can't accomplish something overcome it. I've seen so many kids who are so proud of themselves for having an IV placed, for getting stitches. That like excitement and that proud smile a kid has after they've done something that they came into the hospital and really didn't think they were going to be able to overcome and accomplish, and you know everything was going wrong, and watching them get to that final point it's just a really rewarding, and it's kind of what keeps me coming back every day.
Stacey, what about you?
Mine would be similar, but so we don't have the exact same answer. I would probably say being able, especially more of the ICU setting, be able to help those families in some of their worst or almost worst moments they've been in. So be able to provide that support for them, maybe some of the memory or legacy things that they may not get if they weren't at a children's hospital or something like that, just to sort of help them in those lowest moments. I know we've gotten some feedback before from families. I heard one several months ago who was like kind of going through that loss experience and was on the phone with a friend, and I overheard her say, like, they have somebody here specifically for me who's helping me with all of this stuff, because the friend she was talking to unfortunately had also lost their child and didn't have any of those things provided. I'm not sure where they were, but you know, was just really grateful. And as much as those, you don't want to do those situations and they're hard, but to know that you know, a little bit of our job is, you know, helping these families through those hard times, is finding the lining in those dark situations.
The silver lining of a dark cloud. Yes, definitely. Now, what about you, Leah? What does it mean to you, and what do you find most satisfying about your role?
Yeah, I mean, I can obviously agree with both Holly and Stacey. I think that just like any patient success is just so rewarding. But I think one of the most satisfying things about the job is just like I learn so much every day. It doesn't matter that I've been in the profession for as many years as I have. Every patient can teach me something new, and every interaction I feel like I'm constantly growing and constantly learning. And I think that there's just so much satisfaction knowing that I'm not only so passionate about my job and helping these patients and families through one of the worst journeys they can go on as a family in their oncology journey, but to know that like I'm still learning and I'm still growing, and one interaction here is going to teach me something totally new that I can now implement with every other family I work with. And yeah, I just think that our job is amazing, and the fact that we get to come in and help these families day in and day out, and go home and just be like, wow, today was crazy. I mean, it was busy and it was stressful and all the things, but at the end of the day, I learned so much, and I'm excited for the next day and to see what it brings, and how I can just keep growing.
Well, I feel like we could probably keep talking about this for a very long time, and our viewers would also interact with us on that. But we do need to wrap things up. But before we go, is there anything about your position that you feel like people really do need to understand or know?
I would probably say that to know that our services are available at a children's hospital. So if you go, don't be afraid as a parent to advocate and ask, like, hey, do you guys have child life here? Or hey, what do you do for, yeah, they may have to have an IV. So is there anything we can give them to like help with that? Like, do you have a cold spray? Do you have something to numb it? Do you have distractions? Sort of like speaking up and advocating and asking if they don't see or you know have introduction to a child life specialist when they walk in. Then we may be busy or have to be called from another unit or something, but not being afraid to like just ask and speak up and advocate for their child and their needs.
Great point to end on. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to Stacey, Holly, and Leah for joining us today, and to everyone listening and sending in your questions. To learn more about our initiatives, programs, and services, please visit providence.org, and make sure you follow us on social media so you can see more of these videos. Providence Health System on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and under Providence on Twitter. Thank you all so much for your time. Have a great day.